Particularly delighted to be asked by the Northern Ireland Executive Office to come and speak at something on cross-border cooperation in Northern Ireland. Delighted to see the Northern Ireland Executive kicking off the DISC discussion and process, and it's a really, really exciting initiative. So well done, and we've got full support from, I'm sure, people like myself and Anthony and Eileen and others. So please lift the phone anytime we can be of any help, or even just as a sounding board. So Northern Ireland is sort of in the in the middle of a Venn diagram in terms of cross-border and interjurisdictional and transboundary collaboration. And I think it's when I was preparing for today, I was trying to work out what would be useful, because you're all here with different expertises. You are all going to be getting down into the detail of opportunities for collaboration this afternoon or after the initial sessions. So I thought, well, I better say something that actually tries to inspire people, or at least give people things that they can think about without getting into your areas of expertise. So I was reflecting very much, that we have the 4 regions of the UK here, and we have people from the Republic of Ireland here, and I'm very conscious that in terms of memory, a lot of this goes back to this concept of Europe of the regions, which was a really big driver in the 1990s for looking at how we got balanced territorial development and competitiveness, how we supported lagging regions, how we supported regions that were more deprived than others. And out of that, really, that I think really, really informed the devolution process in the UK as well. So we have a sort of an institutional story over the last 30 years. There's been a lot of groundwork done. Obviously, we have assets between Ireland and the UK, which are absolutely perfect for these kind of discussions. We have the institutional frameworks for them. I remember Anthony actually a few years ago asked me to write an article for the 25th anniversary of the agreement edition of the Journal of Cross-Border Studies, and I can't remember what it was. I think you and I had an exchange about something, and I said, why don't you do something on the run-up, the preparation that was done before the agreement, because this didn't happen overnight, So I dug into the state papers in Dublin, and I found all of these lovely letters from the Northern Ireland Department of Finance and various departments in Northern Ireland to various counterparts in Dublin saying, this thing called the single market, there might be something we could do together around this. And equally, there was correspondence between the Northern Ireland administration at the time and other key officials who were looking at things like regional development and regional uplifting in deprived areas of the UK. And there was this really interesting conversation going on about, okay, how do we make these kind of common shared frameworks work for the kind of challenges that we are now facing? And at the time, it was things like employability, it was solving long-term unemployment, it was looking at post-industrial workforce development, all of those sort of things. But it was a really interesting reminder of the kind of deep thought that has led to the institutional frameworks that we now have at our disposal in these islands to be able to, I suppose in a way, have permission to act in terms of things like what the DISC programme is trying to do. We're all facing, globally we're facing challenges of competitiveness. We're looking at the need to expand existing markets, grow new markets. We need to look at removing obstacles to growth. We need to look at issues around regulatory harmonisation. We have the issue of workforce development for the future to do. We've got things like mobility of qualifications to consider. We've got digital connectivity, digital and physical and infrastructural, and they're two sides of the same coin, and one doesn't completely replace the other, but how they interact spatially in these islands is really important. We've got a green transition to think about. We have the health of our populations to think about in the wake of a pandemic. 100 years ago, Europe was emerging from the Spanish flu pandemic. And we have learning from our pandemic. We have to look at what that taught us about the link between health status and socioeconomic position and deprivation particularly. We have a lot of common challenges that we can use transboundary and cross-jurisdictional collaboration to explore in ways that add value to what we would be able to do on our own. And I think that's the key thing, and I think Anthony and Eileen have both emphasised that idea of the added value. It's not about doing something different, it's not about diverting your resources away, it's actually about doing what you would be doing anyway, but doing it in a way that delivers added value that is greater than the sum of the parts. And that's really the principle of cross-border cooperation, no matter where you are in the world. In terms of where we are, we have, as I've referred to, we have assets. We're a unique border region. We're an external border region of the EU and beyond the EU. We have the unique shared experience of common standards and frameworks that arise from before and during the time that we were, both states were members of the EU. We also have our domestic institutional framework as a result of the agreement. So we have cross-border institutional cooperation, transboundary and interjurisdictional institutional cooperation enshrined in the domestic law of both Ireland and the UK. So when I go to Europe and people go say, it must be awful since Brexit, everything must have stopped. And I go, not at all. We have all of these bilateral arrangements. They're all in place. We're just getting on with it. So I think that's an important story to tell as well. In terms of what I believe I piqued the interest of the Executive Office in inviting me to speak, I was speaking at a conference in Budapest last November called The Art of Cooperation. And I was speaking on a European Commission initiative that Eileen has referenced in her presentation called the B Solutions Project. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Because B Solutions is sort of part of a series of interventions that the European Commission has made and the European institutions have made over the last number of years to really try and respond to this idea that border regions, the growth of the competitiveness of border regions lifts everybody. In European terms, 30% of the EU's population lives in a border region, and 40% of its actual geographical territory is border region. That matters for things like environmental collaboration. There were a number of policy initiatives. I think Anthony might have referred to them already, but it's been a long road with sort of trying to place the cross-border territorial cooperation agenda at the heart of, the cohesion policy agenda in Europe. But there were various stages that went through. In 2017, there was a kind of a key communication called Boosting Competitiveness and Growth through Supporting Border Regions. In 2021, there was another publication that was about border regions being the living labs of innovation and EU integration. The B Solutions Initiative is a tool that's funded by DG Regio, which is applicable on some external borders. At the moment, not this one, but we live in hope. But the B Solutions is a very, very simple thing. It allows border regional authorities or regional or cross-border organisations to where they have identified a legal or administrative obstacle to cross-border cooperation, to have a small resource to commission an expert study which will actually consult, do the research, and put in place a recommended or proposed solution. B Solutions then also takes some of those solutions where organisations want to drive them on in and accelerate implementation. And we work in the space, that multi-level governance space. Very often it involves working with regions and national governments and agencies, and really it's about creating that soft space collaboration in which the solution can actually be delivered, and building the capacity, the institutional capacity for the solution to actually happen, and to not just be a report on a shelf, a nice report saying, this is, we all know what the problem is. Let's actually make the solution. So B Solutions supported about 170 case studies. I'm going to send slides around, by the way, so I'll send some resources and hopefully the Executive Office will be able to share them with you. But there is a full website there. It's run by the Association of European Border Regions and in partnership with the DG Regio Border Focal Point. And there are about 170 case studies there. Everything from mobility of cross-border mobility of parental allowances for workers that are frontier workers, to governance frameworks for cross-border energy communities, to looking at harmonisation. For example, there's a lovely case in the Nordic region which is looking at harmonisation of building regulations across the whole Nordic region. It started out between Sweden and Norway on the basis that if you've got different building regulations in a country, would construction manufacturers have to make things to the spec for the building regulations? So if you've got a different measurement of a door lintel in one country from the other, if you're a wood construction production company, and you know, this is big business in the Nordic region because it's also a renewable construction material, if the measurements are different, you have to have a whole plant and a whole manufacturing line associated with producing something to a different measurement. It means different consignment sizes. It means all sorts of checks and compliance checks and everything else. So they're moving towards this idea of trying to harmonise building regulations so that they suddenly open up this regional market or macro-regional market for construction wood. So B solutions can be, you know, in the grand scheme of things, regarded as quite boring, but it's the nitty-gritty of stuff that actually makes things really happen. And we have cases all over the EU. We have an increasing number of cases in the Western Balkans because we're encouraging a systematic approach to looking at obstacles. It's also worth noting that the reason that B solutions is needed is because even if you've got a European framework or a European legislative framework for something, the interpretation at the level of the member state as to what that actually means in practice can be very different, and you only run into those obstacles at the borders, and it's about ironing those things out. And the latest development in European terms, which is also worth knowing about, is that this week, it's a massive achievement, it's one of those big celebratory things if you're a cross-border nerd like me, the Bridge for EU regulation has been published. And the Bridge for EU regulation is going to be a European regulation that provides member states with a framework for solving these kind of border obstacles together in a sort of a bilateral arrangement by consensus with a very systematic approach to analysing the problem and exchanging files and dossiers and then saying, okay, what are we going to do about this? So essentially what it is a legal framework for member states to actually get involved in cooperation at the borders in ways that will release the full potential of those border regions, not just for national economies, but for the territory as a whole. And the Bridge EU at the moment is, it's been signed up to by all of the 27, and it is it's principally for internal EU borders, but there is, very importantly, in the preamble, there is a clause that says there is nothing to stop a member state setting up an equivalent mechanism and cross-border analysis point with a third country if there is a consensus so to do. And the other thing that is important to understand about the Bridge for EU mechanism and the idea of this sort of cross-border focal point is that it also includes maritime borders. So for the UK, that opens up all sorts of possibilities, not just, also for Ireland, but it recognises that maritime borders matter. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I'll share the link for B Solutions, but it's pretty inspirational stuff. We've done a lot of this kind of work in Ireland, Northern Ireland, over the years. The Centre for Cross-Border Studies, now Cooperation, did a huge amount of analysis in the early days around obstacles in different sectors and stuff. So we understand these kind of systematic processes and how to do this. In terms of where we are now, in terms of what DISC is about, really, I mean, ultimately, we have a history of bilateral collaboration in these islands that goes way, way, way back. We enhanced that in certain eras, but the idea of the common travel area, for example, was like a mini Schengen. Schengen came much later than the common travel area. We were pragmatic about how we solved the challenges for mobility and collaboration in these islands, and that's still there, and we now have institutions that can support that. Ultimately, cross-border cooperation and interjurisdictional cooperation is about the interoperability of territories that are neighbouring, whether they're actually land neighbours or whether they're sea neighbours. So in that sense, it's really, it's not rocket science, it's just about looking at, what the solutions are to make that collaboration easier. Thinking about what our assets are, what are our intellectual, cultural, social, physical, environmental assets. It's not all about money. I think Eileen made that point. You know, it isn't often all about money. There is sometimes, you know, sometimes people think you need the resource to be able to do this. Actually, sometimes it's just about doing differently with what you have and getting a lot more out of it as a result. This afternoon, or in the workshops, you'll all be looking at, you know, different themes. I suppose my thinking would be that for all of the different, whatever the theme that you decide is your area of interest for collaboration and exploring opportunities, there'll always be things that will underpin that, and they're like almost cross-cutting enablers that I would also encourage people to think about and maybe use the DISC platform to explore. And those are obviously things like, you know, capital and knowledge assets. How do those support what we're doing? How do the resources that we have, how can we use those to best effect? Labour force mobility, workforce, you know, if you're looking at research and innovation, are we looking at student mobility across the islands, for example? All those sort of things that are about the future workforce and about how our young people are going to be able to carry this collaboration forward, because none of us are getting any younger. And I mean, I've got a 16-year-old doing GCSEs today. I'm very, very acutely aware of the perspective of the younger generation on all sorts of things. You know, we have things like energy security and energy transition, you know, for every single sector. So what can we do in these islands that actually will help underpin all of that, make everything easier? I would say in looking at themes for collaboration, and this is also experienced from the B Solutions programme, very often the obstacle is actually at the institutional capacity level, and it's not necessarily, it can be just to do with institutional culture that either makes collaboration easier or difficult. In some cases, you can have all of the solutions you like, but unless you've actually got the unless the institutions involved have the capacity to actually make the collaboration happen, then, you know, nothing will happen. And I think that's the thing that I would say, that if you're looking at building capacity for taking forward your ideas, think about some of that stuff around how smart institutions work. Think about how you have your linear and accountability governance, but how do you also have the sort of the governance and the soft space collaboration that allows for people to act across the system, you know, look at. Is anybody here from the health sector? Anybody here from the NHS? No. Okay. So I worked in the NHS transformation and reform for 10 years in Northern Ireland, and not at departmental level. I was in an arm's length organisation. But one of the things that I had the privilege of doing 10 years ago was to train with Helen Bevan from NHS Horizons on as what was then called the School for Health and Care Radicals, and then after a change of government it became the School for Change Agents. But it essentially looked at that whole idea of social movement theory and how within very hierarchical public institutions you can also enable people to undertake that kind of collaborative capital building, which is around, you know, relationships, it's around culture and behaviour, and it's around understanding what the shift needs to be from waiting for permission to act to self-efficacy within a safe framework that's properly governed with risk management and everything else. So I would say pay attention to, particularly if there are people who are in senior leadership positions in institutions and you're interested in doing collaboration, pay attention to how you're giving permission within your organisations for people to actually carry the stuff through. Pay attention to how that translates into the operating environment in your organisation, and pay attention to relationships and the encouragement of how people actually develop those relationships of trust, because understanding obstacles and overcoming them are two different things. Very easy to understand them. We all know what the problems are in a lot of cases. It's how you actually solve them, which is crucial. And for solving them, you need soft space governance, a mixture of soft space and hard governance at the right time and in the right place. You just need that sort of cultural and behavioural capacity. And if you have those things, any additional resources that you have for collaboration will be put to best effect. So I suppose I just want to finish by saying I hope some of that made sense. I hope it's sort of, you know, given you a bit of a reflection for the work that you're going to do today and of the project. And I think we just have a real opportunity with a project like this to really, really demonstrate a unique collaboration space and what that means for all of our people in these islands moving forward, and particularly with all of the global challenges that we're facing, and remembering that we have a lot of assets that a lot of other parts of the world don't have. We have collaboration and institutional cooperation built into our legislative domestic system. So let's use it. Let's stand it up and use it to best effect. Thank you very much.